There are two kinds of people in a store. One picks something up, checks the price, puts it in the cart, and keeps moving. The other picks something up, checks the price, puts it back, checks their phone, opens the bank app, sees the number, puts it in the cart, and spends the rest of the day wondering if they should have. If you're the second person, this video is for you. Not because something is wrong with you, but because that feeling has a name, and it started long before that store. Before we go any further, let's be clear about something. This isn't about being bad with money. You're not reckless, you're not irresponsible, you're not someone who doesn't understand the value of things. In fact, most people who feel this way are exactly the opposite. They're careful, they think twice. They're the ones who do check the balance before spending, the ones who remember every purchase for a week afterward. And yet, the guilt shows up anyway. Even when the account is fine, even when the purchase makes sense, even when nobody is watching and nobody would judge. The guilt doesn't care about logic. It was never about the money. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about. There's a version of the financial world that works very smoothly for some people. They were raised in homes where spending was normal, where money came in, went out, and came back, where buying something wasn't a moral decision, it was just a transaction. They learned early that money is a tool. You use it, it replenishes, you use it again. The system was built with that person in mind. Banks designed for people who assume money will be there. Credit cards designed for people who don't lose sleep over a balance. Entire industries built around the idea that spending feels natural, even good. And for a lot of people, it does. They spend and then they move on. No mental tab left open, no quiet voice asking whether they deserved it, no calculation running in the background hours after the purchase. They were taught, directly or indirectly, that having money means you're allowed to use it. That permission was given early, and it's stuck. But that's not the home everyone grew up in. Some people grew up in homes where money was always almost enough, where spending anything felt like a risk, where an unexpected bill could change the mood of the entire house for a week. You learned to read the atmosphere before asking for anything. You learned that wanting things had a cost, not just financial, emotional, relational. You watched adults worry. You heard the conversations through walls. You understood very early that money wasn't just money. It was safety. It was tension. It was the thing that determined whether the month would be okay or not. And so your brain did what brains do. It built a system to protect you. Spend less, need less, want less, and if you do spend, be ready to justify it. To yourself, to anyone who might ask, to a version of your parents that still lives somewhere in the back of your mind. That system made sense then. It kept you out of trouble. It kept the peace. It made you responsible before you were old enough to understand what responsibility even meant. The problem is that system doesn't know the account balance changed. It doesn't get the update. It doesn't check the numbers. It just runs, automatically, quietly, every single time you reach for your wallet. The guilt isn't irrational. It's loyal. It's still protecting you from a version of life that no longer exists. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. This pattern, the guilt, the hesitation, the feeling that spending is somehow dangerous, it doesn't just live in individuals. It moves through generations. Researchers who study financial behavior across families have found something quietly remarkable. The money habits of grandparents show up in grandchildren, not through conversations, not through lessons, through atmosphere, through what was never said, through the tension that filled a room when a bill arrived. There's even a name for it in some psychological circles, financial trauma transmission, the idea that economic hardship leaves marks not just on the people who lived through it, but on the people who grew up watching them. Your grandparents may have lived through a period where saving wasn't wisdom, it was survival, where spending anything felt like gambling with the family's security. That feeling was real, it was earned, it made complete sense for that world, and then it got passed down. Not as a lesson, as a reflex, which means the guilt you feel in a store today might not even be yours originally. It might be borrowed, inherited, a hand-me-down from people who had very good reasons to feel exactly this way, in a world that no longer exists for you. And yet, it would be dishonest not to say this. There are moments when that inherited reflex stops being protection and starts being a wall. When you avoid spending on something that would genuinely improve your life, not because you can't afford it, but because the guilt feels too heavy to carry afterward. When you say no to experiences, to comfort, to things that would make the day a little easier, not out of discipline, but out of a feeling you can't quite explain. Or when you finally do spend, and instead of enjoying it, you spend the next 3 days quietly prosecuting yourself for it. That's not protection anymore. That's the system running past its purpose. It's not a character flaw. It's not weakness. It's a response that outlived the conditions that created it and now shows up in situations it was never designed for. Recognizing that doesn't make the feeling disappear, but it changes what the feeling means. So let's reframe this completely. You didn't develop a broken relationship with money because you're weak, or because you lack discipline, or because you never learned the right habits. You developed this relationship because you were paying attention. You saw what happened when money ran out. You felt the weight of that in your body before you had words for it, and you adapted, the way every human adapts to the environment they grow up in. The financial system will tell you the solution is a budget, a spreadsheet, a rule about percentages. And maybe those things help for some people at some point, but they don't touch this, because this isn't a math problem. It never was. It's a safety system that was built in a different era for a different version of your life, by a younger version of you who was doing exactly the right thing with the information they had. You didn't fail the system failed to prepare you for stability, and there's a significant difference between those two things. If you've spent years feeling like something was quietly wrong with you every time you opened your wallet, you were never broken. You were just carrying something that was never yours to carry alone. And the fact that you still show up, still try, still check the balance, still think twice, still care this much about getting it right, that's not a flaw. That's someone who learned to take things seriously in a world that gave them very good reasons to. You don't need to fix yourself. You need to understand yourself. And maybe, just maybe, that understanding is where things start to feel a little lighter. If this felt familiar, if somewhere in this video you recognized a version of yourself, there's a good chance something else does too. Because the people who grow up learning to need less, spend less, want less, are often the people who are very good at their jobs, very reliable to everyone around them, and very uncomfortable receiving anything in return. The guilt around spending is rarely alone. Next, we're going to talk about the psychology of people who feel like they haven't earned the right to rest. Not yet, not quite, not until everything is done. And everything is never quite done. If that sounds familiar, you already know where to find us.